Hello, and Sanbonani, Huyamora, and Dumelang, Aye. Good morning, everyone. My name is Desiree Mojanacha from the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Welcome to our webinar on showcasing some of the success stories in addressing South Africa's water challenges. Our webinar will focus mainly on the water infrastructure initiatives which have been implemented by the Infrastructure Investment Program for South Africa. This program is also known as the IPSA. The IPSA program is very much aligned to the DBSA infrastructure development strategy. Part of the strategy is to provide tangible infrastructure solutions to our metros and to our municipalities. Now, with regards to the water sector, the DBSA focuses on the entire infrastructure value chain by addressing issues such as non-revenue water, off-grid sanitation and rural water supply, water reuse, and other water capital expenditure programs in South Africa. Now, to put this into context, the DBSA has been appointed as the fund manager of the IPSA program. The purpose of the IPSA is to support the development of government's national and regional infrastructure plans by providing funding together with other DFIs. The IPSA program is supported by the European Union, which is a dominant contributor to FDIs, as well as an important development partner to South Africa. Today, our speakers will share some of the behind-the-scenes work involved in addressing the country's challenges of water security and water scarcity. One of the case studies which will be unpacked today is the eThekwini Aqueduct project. We will also discuss the City of Tshwane's water conservation and water demand management program. Now, these are all multi-year programs which have a great potential of being replicated in other municipalities. Now, for your convenience, we have enabled the chat function, and we welcome your questions and your comments as we proceed. The webinar is also streamed live on YouTube, together on other social media platforms. Hello and Sanbonani. Huyamora Dumelang. My name is Desiree Mojanacha from the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Welcome to our webinar on showcasing some of the success stories in addressing South Africa's water challenges. Our webinar will focus mainly on water infrastructure projects implemented through the IPSA program. The IPSA program is supported by the European Union, which is a dominant contributor of FDIs, as well as a strong development partner in South Africa. We will be showcasing some of the multi-year programs relating to water infrastructure and which can be replicated in other municipalities. Please join us in our conversations as we discuss some of the successes that have been implemented in our country. Now, I'd like to hand over to our moderator, Ms. Anthea Stevens, who is the lead program manager for climate and sustainability, as well as the cities program at National Treasury. Over to you, Anthea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Desiree, and good morning to everyone there. It's my pleasure to be your moderator today for this webinar. As Desiree has outlined, we're here to learn a little bit more about some of the experiences of the IPSA program in delivering grant funding to the water sector. And I think in particular, the opportunity to learn from what IPSA has done holds valuable lessons for us as we grapple with some of the water challenges that South Africa faces. The water challenges, I think, are probably well known to many of us in terms of South Africa being an arid country, climate change starting to affect our ability to rely on certain water resources, and the need for investments in the maintenance not only of our bulk, but also of our reticulation infrastructure, and the need to build infrastructure to keep up with the growing demand for water resources. So it's an opportune time to look at some of the successes that have come out of a program like IPSA's support to the water sector, to understand a little bit about what made some of those successes, where the challenges were, and how we take those experiences to scale in a country like South Africa, with recognizing the challenges and opportunities where they exist. So we have a really interesting program today lined up. Desiree, are you able to share the agenda, or has that been shared with the panelists, the participants?
Anthea, thank you. The agenda will be available on the chat function for everyone to see.
Thank you. All right. So the agenda will be shared with you, colleagues, but what I want to outline then is we'll start off with an input from the Acting Deputy Director General at the Department of Water and Sanitation, Mr. Leonardo Manaus, where he's taking responsibility to improve compliance, monitoring and enforcement, including the establishment of the economic regulator, as well as the revival of the blue and green drop certification programs. Mr. Manaus has been in the public sector since 1998, a considerable legacy and history in the public sector. And he started his civil engineering journey as a student at the Eden District Municipality, so has full understanding of the range of issues from a local to a national level. So Acting DDG, let me pass over to you for you to share a few perspectives on the South African water sector and setting the scene and laying the context for this webinar today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anthea. Good morning, everyone. I'll try and just give you a brief snapshot in terms of where we are in South Africa as far as the water sector is concerned. Yes. By now, everybody would know the fact that in 1994, we started off on a platform where less than 50% of the population of this country didn't have access to adequate water and sanitation. But that was then. But there's another thing that we need to keep in mind as well. The question we should ask ourselves, when in the 1960s and the 1970s, when the infrastructure in various towns were developed, did the apartheid government at that stage design the infrastructure in anticipation that apartheid will end and that there will become a time when there's inclusive economic growth and where that economic growth was going to place an additional demand on that infrastructure? But that be as it may, and I think that let's leave that there because restating the problem is not going to help us much. Let's go a little bit further. What has been done since? We have looked after our water security. We've implemented about 22 major water resource projects, starting with in the far south, we had the Berg River Dam that augments the water security of the city of Cape Town. Right out of the north, where we had Nandoni Dam that's now currently looking at the water security in the bigger Vembe area and also in the Mopani area of Limpopo. We've lifted the water services and the supply as well as sanitation services up to about 90% of the country. That was a good work done, but was it enough? So what is wrong currently? Then we can categorize the two sides as far as what is wrong in terms of quantity as well as quality. And let us focus on quantity first. Obviously, our unaccounted for water that we're recording across this country is just too high, especially the component of unaccounted for water, which is water losses. Now, as far as the water losses are concerned, I just want to mention one example to you. There was a municipality that came to a ministerial session recently. And in the session, they claimed that they're requiring additional 40% of water use authorization to have additional water. But just on close inspection, we realized that 65% of the water gets lost due to leakages. So what's the point of putting that additional strain on our water resource when we can't look after our water losses? And I think that is something that we need to we can't afford water losses because we are a water scarce country. Climate change is playing a major role in this whole aspect. And yes, perhaps today we can say, but we're experiencing one of the wettest seasons. The climatologists want us to believe, or meteorologists want us to believe, that there might be another dramatic cyclone or higher rainfall season that is actually coming, bigger than the one we're currently experiencing. But what does that help Gqeberha or the other towns in the Eastern Cape where we sit with water in a Kucha dam, which currently sits at 16%. I think that we need to be more focused in terms of that and in that area as well. And then at the end of the day, we also look at the loss of storage that we have with sedimentation that is coming in as well. The master plan, the National Water Master Plan, sets 2030 there for us as an example. And that is to say, we're going to hit that time, 2030, when we have a 17% deficit as far as our water supply and demand balance is concerned. And therefore, it is an element of the business that we have to look at. Now, at this stage, if you don't mind, because I'm just seeing that I only have a head on the screen, so perhaps I will put my jacket on, and then it will help a little bit with the image as well. I trust that will help. So I'm not only a head, I'm also a person. So then on the quality side, we have lots of people that are experiencing the real raw end as far as our business is concerned with regards to water and sanitation when they smell and they see the sewage in the street. It means that our sewer spillages that we have in the country is just unacceptable. The dysfunctional wastewater treatment works are just unacceptable. We cannot, and I certainly won't forget what happened in Delmas in 2005. I won't forget what happened in Delmas in 2007, when children died because wastewater ended up in an aquifer that supplied the town and the people had typhoid. Now, yes, today there are lots of stories going around there's typhoid in the water. I can assure you, if there was typhoid in the water, we would have had the situation we had in Delmas, where 2,500 people on a single day got infected. And we had people that were dying at that stage as well. So this is what we have currently. It's still not acceptable as far as the wastewater is concerned. So there's something on the quality side that needs to be done. But before I come to the solution, let me just talk in terms of now going into addressing the increase in demand. Yes, we have strategic water projects that we're looking at. Some of them are being implemented. We are implementing the raising of Glen William, the raising of Tsanin, the raising of Hazelmere. The Mzimvubu Dam, the Namitwa Dam is also on the cards. There are various other projects that we are looking at. And are we in the space as a department, as government alone to afford the implementation and do it? Not at all. We came to that realization that it's time that we need to look a little bit beyond, outside of the box, something that I not always think, because I would like to be thinking that I'm not inside the box. And we need to be outside of it and expand our thinking in terms of how we're going to do things. Now, as far as the wastewater treatment works are concerned, incentive-based regulation, we took our foot a little bit off the pedal for a long time in this country. And unfortunately, taking the foot off the pedal has caused incentive-based regulation to die down a little bit. But it made a difference in the past when it was here, even though it was a very brave move of us in South Africa, because it's an incentive-based regulation in the water sector. Nobody heard of it before, but we dared to be brave and we went into it in spite of the fact that when I presented this concept in 2009 at the World Health Organization's Regulators Network in Singapore, there were two officials from the United States of America who laughed at me. Good enough the fact that they turned around and eventually we received as a country from that very same officials institution in America an award in terms of the innovation that we did. So it made an impact in the past. It will make an impact now. We revived the Green Dot certification program in June 2021, and we are ready to release that report. Now, the report is not going to give unto you a restatement of the problem in South Africa. It's rather going to diagnose the problem in South Africa so that we can have a baseline from where we can actually move to actually improve the situation from where we have come from. Now, the one thing that we're going to focus on is restoring functionality, because for perhaps too long have we focused on rebuilding and building new infrastructure. And I'm sure that as a country that we will come to the point where we will understand we can't afford that way of thinking no more. we have to refurbish, we have to also rehabilitate what we have, and we have to bring back into functionality what we have before we look and spend money in terms of what the new would be. I think that in terms of that, we can look forward to it. I don't want to speak much more of it because I think that is in the space of the minister to speak on that. Now, I come to the point of what the minister raised. He actually came to a point where he asked the question from us. Is it still wise to expect water service authorities that have been failing for many years to expect them to be in charge of the turnaround if they haven't been able to keep afloat what they were supposed to keep afloat? Now, it's a brave question to ask. We went to Cabinet on the 27th of January with that concept of a water services improvement program, which is point down to a 10-point plan, which we're currently working on to actually expand, because the entire Cabinet was in unison that it's a valid question to ask, and they require a fully fledged framework in that regard to actually see how we're going to address this problem. So we are making bold and brave statements in that framework as we are busy drafting it to ensure that we get to the point where we are reviewing, because come to the point that would you go to a doctor and return to a doctor that is whose patients are continuing to die? I think we'll ask ourselves the question, shouldn't we go to somewhere else? And that is perhaps the things that we have been actually looking at. Now, that 10-point plan ranges from the fact that we need to review our water boards, even for that matter, because if we have to depend on them to do certain things, then are they in a state to do it? And we have started reviewing even the functionality and capacity of our water boards to the extent where we are disestablishing Sedibeng Water Board, and we are looking at other ways and means of actually looking at getting things right. But the major thing that I want to come back to, Anthea, perhaps at the end, would be the private collaboration that is required, because alone government cannot do what we want to do and what we have to do. But we also realize to the point that it might be an opportune time for us to broaden the horizon so that we can get more done at a higher rate. I want to repeat this. I want to emphasize this rather, that we're not talking about privatization. And I want to repeat it again. We're not talking about privatization, but we are talking about private collaboration because it's already existing. There's already things being done. And I want to just mention a simple little example that when we think about private collaboration, we think of these big corporates and big industries that need to come, but sometimes it's the smaller ones that also can play a role. Now, in Salt Lake in Kimberley, there's a wastewater treatment works called Homevale. And Homevale has been threatening the condition of the comfort pan that it sits on the outside, but it also caused damage to the railway line that is passing the town, that is going between Cape Town and Johannesburg. Now, there's a little agricultural fraternity there just down the road called Beefmaster. And Beefmaster looked at this and they went to Salt Lake municipality and said, can we assist? And they used their own money to assist because they knew that they depended on that railway line to get their produce to Cape Town. And that was one of the concepts that we are basing this whole concept of private collaboration on, because we do believe that that is what's going to take us forward. So people on the platform, I trust that with those few words, I've created the environment in which we are finding ourselves currently in the Department of Water and Sanitation, who after over the past 20 years had 15 DGs. And that was not a sustainable environment in which we could go forward. But it is our intention that with this framework and plan that we will be going forward, that no matter, we trust that Dr. Phillips will stay with us for very long, but no matter who will be in charge, that we rally around as a sector, as a country, that we will be rallying around this plan to ensure that we reach that point in 2030, where we come to the point where we can say that we have achieved, we're in a better condition what we've been in 2022, because we have implemented a plan that was a South African plan and not a political plan, not a plan affiliated to a certain group of class or whatever the case may be, but that every South African can benefit from this plan in terms of our water security, our environment, and the quality of water that we consume. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you, Acting DDG. That was a rousing and a very inspiring, I think, keynote address. From recognizing, the great strides that South Africa has made in extending service delivery since the dawn of democracy in 1994, and the challenges that we face, the efforts that we've made to build our infrastructure, that we have in the country, and the pressing need to actually look at and invest in looking after what we've got, while recognizing the need for infrastructure to cope with the pressures of urbanization, what comes with economic growth. And you've pointed out work that's underway in the department to revive mechanisms like the blue and green drop, which help to tell us the state of our infrastructure and where those investments in maintenance and renewal of that infrastructure is needed. You've also put out a challenge here for everyone to think outside the box and look at solutions that, if we can't keep trying to solve the problem with the same solutions and expecting a different result. We actually need to work a little bit differently. And you've spoken about the need for partnerships, and that private collaboration, not, as you said, privatization, but looking at how we can work in partnerships with the stakeholders that depend on the infrastructure to deliver the services that we need. So I think a fantastically sort of orientating keynote address for the webinar today. We've got over 200 participants on the line. We have a couple of questions coming in on the Q&A already, which we will respond to in the Q&A session, which comes later on in the webinar. But if you do want to engage with those questions as we go, you're obviously very, very welcome to do that. So again, I just want to welcome those 212 participants that are here with us today. Thank you, Acting DDG, for your input. And I'm now going to hand over to the Deputy Ambassador of the European Union to South Africa, Mr. Raul Luzenberger, to talk to us a little bit about the contextual significance of collaboration in addressing some of these challenges, picking up really beautifully from where you left off with your call for how we reach out in partnerships to address some of the challenges that we have, so that we can build a little bit more of the successes that we're here to talk about today. Raul de Luzenberger is the Deputy Head, as I said, of the EU delegation to South Africa. He holds an economics degree from the University of Naples Frederico II and the University of Rome, both in Italy, and an MA in economics from the University of UK. So, Deputy Ambassador, thank you very much. Over to you for your address. Thank you.
Dear Ms. Stevens, thank you very much for this introduction and for outlining, my background. Yes, I've been a professional economist up to a certain point in my life, and then I became a diplomat, enjoying, I must say, the second part much more than the first. So, dear fellow panelists, participants, good morning, everyone. Thank you for allowing me, a few words in this webinar. Thank you very much, DDG Manus, for the very, arousing speech, very, extremely committing. One of the first things I did in arriving in South Africa was to participate to a big environmental event in Cape Town in the middle of the crisis, of the water crisis in Cape Town in 2018. And it was really, challenging and extremely, a big loss for Cape Town. The water crisis, they lost in terms of tourism, their agriculture was suffering, and, and the situation was really dramatic. I remember, vividly how we were trying to save water in every possible way. You've gone a very long way. You profited from that experience very much. And I think it's very interesting now to look forward and see, how you can further and further improve in a situation where, as we know from the mapping of the water sources that we did together with our research centers in Europe, South Africa faces a challenge in coming years of droughts and water scarcity. So allow me to thank the National Treasury and the Development Bank of South Africa for organizing this important exchange. And, I'll start my speech now. So the right to water is a fundamental human right that is enshrined in South Africa Bills of Rights, and it is a key element of the EU support for democratic South Africa. Between 2001 and 2012, targeted EU support for South Africa wide-ranging Mazibambane water and sanitation program was in the region of 225 million euros. While great strides were made through this program, as part of the Department of Water Affairs, broader delivery of potable water to communities throughout South Africa, much remains to be done, especially in the area of water resource management. Today, economic challenges and population growth, as well as climate change, exert increasing pressure on the worldwide demand for water. In this regard, the integrated cross-border management of water resources is increasingly necessary for sustainable water use, water efficiency, and the safeguarding of water ecosystems. This is the only achievable through working together on water resources. So I wish to thank you, the National Treasury and the Development Bank of South Africa, for this opportunity to share a few remarks on behalf of the European Union and for this opportunity. In South Africa, water authorities are seeking solutions to establish a strong and resilient water sector to embrace societal water challenges, especially regarding water scarcity. The challenges are, of course, that while much of South Africa water supply infrastructure urgently needs to be upgraded and modernized, several barriers exist to investment in and the financing of water infrastructure projects. In this regard, the greatest challenges probably is the bankability of water infrastructure projects, and this must be identified and overcome in order for water supply to be sustainable in South Africa. So, along with several of our member states, the EU supports South Africa efforts to review strategy, policy, and regulatory framework for water efficiency, both in industry and in water supply. Collectively, with our, what we call the Team Europe, so the European Union institutions and the member states, supports research and numerous dialogues, including the ongoing climate service dialogue with its strong focus on water. And additionally, we are ready to facilitate more expert exchanges, both with our public as well as with our private sector. In total, the EU allocated 1.7 billion rands, around 1 million euros, to support infrastructure investment for South Africa through the Infrastructure Investment Program for South Africa, the IPSA that you have seen nominated already. A significant amount, around 20% of the total, in grants was committed to DBSA water-related projects. So looking ahead, at the EU-African Union Summit in February, the EU launched the Global Gateway Investment Package. The Global Gateway Africa-Europe Investment Package aims to support Africa for a strong, inclusive, green, and digital recovery and transformation through an investment package that is more than 150 billion of euro. And this will be invested in Africa, including in ensuring water security. And in our new cooperation priorities for South Africa, for the 2021-27, the EU offers to South Africa support to adapt and mitigate climate change, to transition to a job-intensive greener economy, and for a digital agenda. Reflecting this development cooperation, grants will never be sufficient. Reflecting that development cooperation grants will never be sufficient for addressing massive financing gaps, the EU is keen to scale up the support through innovative financial tools. The EU has combined our grants with lending operations, something we call blending, lending operation from development finance institutions to make loans financially viable, keep tariffs low and cost low, but important to link such grants to sector reforms. For example, in Senegal, we have provided blending grants to wastewater collection and treatment as part of a wider effort to improve the environmental quality of the Han Bay. In Uganda, we have provided blending grants to ensure that lending for urban water supply in 2 secondary cities also extended services to nearby refugees camps. And we believe that we should also reflect with South Africa on how to work more closely with subnational municipal entities, and in particular, on enhancing capacity and efficiency for service delivery, notably through digital and innovative solutions, and to leverage financing for investments towards a sustainable, resilient, and greener local development. The infrastructure investment program for South Africa will continue to accelerate the rollout of much needed infrastructure for the country in conjunction to the many development finance institutions that are present in the country. As will be demonstrated today, blended finance solutions can act as catalytic to innovative financing of water infrastructure, which is so badly needed. IPSA is an example of such financing solutions. In conclusion, the need to invest in water sector and prioritizing investment has never been greater than today. By working together and utilizing all tools available, the challenges can be overcome. I hope that today's discussion will inspire much needed concrete solutions for water infrastructure investment and service deliveries in South Africa. And I look forward to an open and lively debate on the key gaps, lessons learned, and potential future partnership between the government, municipality, donors, banks, the FDIs, and the European Union. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Ambassador. And I think some important comments there and highlighting the role, the critical role that finance can play in bringing about reforms to the sector, not only just in bringing finance into the delivery of projects, but looking at how finance can also contribute towards improved performance, improved management, and getting the outcomes that we need from our water infrastructure. And I think the contribution of the European Union through IPSA, as well as many other investment avenues, has been a significant one to South Africa. And I think the legacy is there. We're going to hear a little bit further on the agenda today about some of that contribution and legacy through the experiences of the city of eThekwini and city of Tshwane through IPSA. But there's certainly a lot of these are strong foundations that we can look to build off. So thank you for those remarks as well. Colleagues, I'm going to move us on now to an input from Johan Lubbe. Johan has the intriguing title of Disruption Specialist in the project preparation team at the DBSA, where he's responsible for the identification, conceptualization, design, and development of innovative financial products. So very much building off of the Deputy Ambassador's foundations, looking at the role that finance can play. Johan is a professional engineer, but has spent some time expanding that disciplinary background to include law, as well as development finance from different institutions. I'm not going to repeat the bio, Johan, but I think we're very much looking forward to hearing from you on what you're doing in the DBSA and how you're working to bring the DBSA's water program as a response in terms of building a programmatic response to South Africa's water challenges. And I think we'll hand over to you for your contribution here. So thank you, Johan.
Great, thank you, Anthea, and good morning, everybody. So I just want to sort of share some of the work that the DBSA is currently doing in the water sector. I think we're working along various partners, partnering government to try and establish a bit of a programmatic approach when it comes to addressing some of the challenges that we know are facing the water sector. So I think you would all agree that the water sector is probably the most difficult sector to finance. It's much more difficult than, for example, energy, where we know, there's clear revenue streams, but that's a big challenge when it comes to water supply and financing in the water sector. But I want to sort of follow that statement by saying we often feel that funding is a problem. And maybe a bit of a controversial statement to say that money is not our problem when it comes to funding the water sector. There's enough money around. There are other systemic issues, there are bankability issues, there are project pipeline issues that I think we need to address in order for us to access sufficient funding for our water infrastructure and our water supply and sanitation projects. We know that there are various systemic issues facing the water sector. Not only, well, technical is probably the easiest to solve, but we've got enabling environment, we've got policy and regulatory aspects, we've got revenue aspects, we've got the institutional governance, financial aspects, and all of these things together are what we need to solve for in order for us to move forward in the water sector. So what we've also done, I think, in the past is we've looked at sort of projects in a silo manner. We're trying to solve different or the same challenge in different areas by looking at it on a project by project basis. And we are missing the benefits that I think a programmatic approach is there for us to benefit from. So what we're trying to do and what we're working on at the moment is to see how we can put something together from a program perspective. And we stepped back a bit and said, let's look at the success of some of the other sectors, specifically the renewable energy program, the RE program. And there were two key things that stood out for us in that program, and we know the success of the program. The first one, I think, was the IPP office that was created, which was sort of the one-stop or the place where you went if you wanted to do renewable energy projects, and that created some sort of a center of excellence when it came to projects being implemented in the country. And then there was also a specific funding solution. We looked at project finance. Most of the RE programs and projects were funded on a project finance basis. Yes, there was a guarantee from national government, but those are sort of two key elements that I think stood out for us, and we said, how can we replicate that into the water sector? So what we are busy with now is working with government, working with the Department of Water and Sanitation to put together a national water program. So the DWS would be the owner of the program, and we want to then bring some of these elements that we saw in the RE program into this water program. And firstly is to create sort of a center of excellence, and we currently discussing calling it a water partnerships office. And that water partnerships office is really there to then form capacity, provide support to project owners to take their projects forward. So it almost becomes the one-stop shop when you want to do a certain type of project. is that you would approach that office and say, help me, assist me in progressing my project, creating a bankability, looking at the feasibility studies, and then looking at the implementation side. And then the second element that we're working on is to say, how do we come up with innovative and alternative funding solutions when it comes to financing water infrastructure? At the moment, we've got basically two options. I know there are more, but the two major options, the first one is municipal balance sheets, for municipalities to raise funding on their balance sheet to invest into infrastructure. And the second one is our triple Ps. We know the triple Ps can't work in all cases. And we also know that the balance sheets of municipalities doesn't allow them to raise sufficient funding to meet all their needs. And there's actually just a handful of municipalities that can raise funding. So we have to, we're almost forced to think out of the box and to come up with innovative solutions when it comes to funding. And one of the key things there that we are looking at is around blended finance, bringing in the private sector more, reducing the reliance on government funding, and to see how we can then put those specific funding options available together, and then it becomes a part of a suite of options that can be used to finance specific projects. So within this national water program, which we see as the umbrella program, there would then be a number of sub-programs that would be slotting in under that umbrella program. So the primary focus at this stage is on the municipal sector, on local government, so what local government is responsible for. And three of the primary solutions or sub-programs that we are working on at the moment. The first one is a water reuse sub-program, and it's really trying to see how can we scale and escalate water reuse projects across the country. We're currently losing a lot of water down our rivers and into the ocean, valuable resource. Leonardo mentioned earlier, being a water scarce country, we just cannot afford to lose that water. And there's maximum value to be extracted, not only from the water side, but from energy, our ability to generate energy, our ability to beneficiate the sludge. So the water reuse is one of the sub-programs. Another one is non-revenue water. Leonardo also mentioned in his keynote address the importance of not losing water, and there we're focusing on not only the physical losses but also revenue losses. So that's another sub-program we're working on. A third one that I can mention is around addressing some of the wastewater treatment challenges that municipalities are facing. Again, Leonardo mentioned, the impact that has on the environment, and the inability of municipalities often to address that challenge. So we're working on a new model, a private sector participation model that's specifically geared to try and address and support municipalities, especially our under-resourced municipalities, to address that challenge of non-performance around wastewater treatment. So other programs that we are considering is off-grid sanitation program. There's a community and rural water supply initiative or program that we're working on. And one can then bring in other programs like ecological infrastructure, desalination. We're working on things in the agricultural water use space at the moment. So I think there's huge opportunity for us then to have these ring-fenced sub-programs that forms part of the National Water Program. And just to share with you some of the work that we see that this Water Partnerships Office would be doing is really to create, as I said, it would be sort of a center of excellence where we would have some expertise. And the idea is that office would then support the project owners, being municipalities, being water boards, being government in general, as the owners of these projects and the mandate owners of these projects, to support them to take the projects through a preparation process and then into the financing and implementation side. So it's to create that enabling environment, to support with project preparation, to support with standardized approaches. I think there's We saw what happened with the reprogram once, we moved across the different windows. As the investors, as the consultants, as the developers became more familiar with the documentation, with the approach, we saw what happened with the pricing. So, reinventing the wheel on every project we're doing is not helping us at all. So if we can start getting a standardized approach, for example, if you talk about water reuse or non-revenue water, I think that will go a long way in terms of reducing our cost and also accelerating and advancing the implementation side of these projects. So that's sort of what there's many other things as well, but some of the ideas that this Water Partnerships Office would be doing. And then on the funding solutions, we're working on various funding solutions. As I mentioned, blended finance. We in the past, we tended to look at government and said, give us the check for this project. And we were 100% of the money were required from government. So we need to change that and say, what is the maximum amount of funding that we can raise from the private sector? Our pension funds, commercial banks, our asset managers, they're there and ready to invest, but they don't always have the structures and the mechanisms to do that. So bringing in credit enhancement from DFIs, tenor extension, the first loss facilities, guarantee products, that we can maximize the private sector investment portion and then reduce what is necessary and required from government. So government then to potentially come in with filling that gap if there is any gap on these projects. And then also to facilitate climate finance. There's some concessional funding available from various climate investors, and we need to bring that in. We're working on project bond programs for water reuse, for example. We're in discussions with the Green Climate Fund, the GCF, to put a big package of funding together for water reuse projects in the country. On the non-revenue water, we're working on performance-based contracting models to customize that for South Africa. We know that there's a number of models that's been developed internationally, and we want to bring that in and say, here's an option that we can get the private sector to come in and to finance and also be involved in the implementation and the operation and maintenance of these projects. So just to summarize, I think what the program solution is trying to achieve is to facilitate private sector participation. As we said, not only from a funding perspective, but also from an implementation perspective. We know that the private sector is there and they're ready to participate, but we don't always have the structures, the mechanisms to get the money and the projects together. As we mentioned, there are limited, opportunities for us to do that, but that's part of what we want to achieve with this programmatic solution and with the partnerships office. A very important point is to look at the operation and maintenance elements. If you get a funder to fund, you have to demonstrate that there would be sufficient. You've got capacity, you've got funding available, and the ability to properly operate and maintain that asset. You don't want to create an asset that's 3 years down the line is dysfunctional again. Funders will never want to be associated with funding such infrastructure. So we have to demonstrate that we've got the ability, and again that's where we see the private sector coming in. So for them to come in and assist municipalities to operate and maintain, and as Leonardo mentioned earlier, we're not talking about privatization, but we're talking about maybe management contracts, but longer term contracts where we can bring the private sector in. They've got the expertise, they've got the capability to do that, and then also ensure that the skills transfer is happening within a municipal space. So that's a very important point that all these programs and sub-programs will also be addressing. And then, of course, the pipeline of projects that we need to create. There's a couple of things. Well, there's many things that you look at when it comes to creating bankable projects. Some of them include political will. it's probably ranking right up there. We need to get that political will to want to make a difference, to want to look at alternative options and solutions so that we can improve service delivery to communities and residents within our municipalities. Revenue streams, I don't probably have to say anything about that. We know it's easier in the energy space, much more difficult in the water space. But creating revenue streams, and it may not necessarily be people always paying for services, although that's the primary objective. But in some cases, if you have indigents, you have to maybe look at other sources of revenue, like grant funding that we know comes from government, and to, in an innovative way, see how we can utilize that. But the payment for services, I think, is quite important, and directly linked to that is cost-reflective tariffs. I think that is something that we've seen is often lacking in our municipalities, in our utilities, that we don't often know what it costs us to provide the service. And then we're under-recovering, and that whole water business then falls flat within municipalities, and we won't be able to provide that service. Anthea, I'll pause there for now. I think that just sort of highlighted some of the things that we are doing. It's quite exciting space at the moment. It's not an easy space, but we hope that we can make some progress and really open up this, create the environment in which we can, as Leonardo mentioned, partner with the private sector and see how we can enhance and progress our water space in the country. Thank you.
Thanks, Johan. And I think, what you've highlighted really sort of, well, certainly, the development and the conceptualization of the National Water Program, or what are you calling it, the Water Partnerships Program, building off of the success of the renewable energy experience, the REAP, and being this place where municipalities can access the expertise, the finance, the one-stop shop to address the range of challenges that they're facing. And your input really highlighted that value chain, actually, of investments not only in projects and some of the challenges that getting those projects off the ground face. It's not money, but it's around the capacity, the capability to prepare bankable projects and have a pipeline for doing that. But you also highlighted some of the systemic challenges that are real and that we need to grapple with alongside ensuring that we have projects on the ground that can meet the growing need and demand for infrastructure. And some of those challenges, they're wide, institutional, they sit in the enabling environment. But as connecting back to the acting DDG's input, they speak to the extent to which we look after the infrastructure we get. So we really need to see the challenges from across the value chain. And I think some of the questions that I'm starting to see on the Q&A, which we'll come to when we get to the Q&A session on the agenda. So I want to encourage participants to keep putting the questions to us. We're noting them, we're catching them. Some of them are being answered by the panelists. So I'm hoping that you're seeing those, but we do also have time on the agenda for responses from the panelists to those questions. But the questions are coming in and they're speaking directly to these issues of the challenges in the wider enabling environment, issues around regulation, issues around reallocation and redress, and opportunities, people from the private sector saying, how can we work with you? What are the opportunities to work with you to address some of these challenges? So I think some good engagement there, and some good networking happening also on the chat where people are introducing themselves. I think let's go, and we're making good time. And so with that, I'm hoping that we'll have time for a rich discussion after these inputs. Our next input comes from Fabian Mangai, and I hope I got that presentation right. Apologies if I didn't. Please feel free to correct me. Fabian's been the task team leader in the water and sanitation team of the AFD for the last 3 years. Also an engineer who's been working in the market finance sector and has significant experience in the water and sanitation sector. So Fabian's going to be speaking to the EU's experience in assisting developing countries, looking particularly at the water sector with a focus on the SADC region and how projects have supported the development of the water sector in the SADC region. So Fabian, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Antea. I will speak about the experience of AFD, actually the French Development Agency. AFD is a bilateral international financial institution which has been present in South Africa since 1994, hence 25 years of experience. We represent volume of financing of 12 billion euros annually, of financial commitments around the world in 130 countries, and for all sectors. For the water and sanitation sector, we represent 1 billion euros of investment annually. We operate with loans, concessional loans, and grants. Grants are dedicated to countries in crisis like Afghanistan, Haiti, or for example, the Palestinian territories, and to the poorest countries of interest to the French cooperation, like the Sahel region, French-speaking African countries, which are among the poorest countries. Of these 1 billion euros in water and sanitation annually, we spend 40% of our commitments in sanitation. And I have to say that the water and sanitation sector is very good for our group commitments in climate change adaptation and mitigation, for gender equality, and for biodiversity, which are focuses of AFD, like other international financing institutions. We are able to fund all types of projects, mainly infrastructure projects in the water sector. And we are good at, as a French institution, and linked to, well, not linked, but we have discussions, and we have the same culture of our French operators, which are leading internationally the water sector. We are good at financing great infrastructure for major cities and metropolis, like we do for water treatment and wastewater treatment mainly. We do that in Uganda, Bangladesh, in Ivory Coast and Senegal, in India for the 24-hour service, in Pakistan, Egypt, mainly for wastewater treatment. In the Southern African region, we are mainly present in the Republic of South Africa. We have some activities in Zambia, in Namibia, in Zambia around the project for water and sanitation service in the Copperbelt region. In Namibia, we have a technical cooperation on groundwater management, which is ongoing. But our focus is on the Republic of South Africa, which is the biggest country of the region, where we have committed 2.5 billion euros since 1994. In the water sector, we have three main experiences of infrastructure financing. In Johannesburg for water supply in Soweto, that was 15 years ago. In Durban, with the TCTA, which is a governmental vehicle for infrastructure development in the water sector, around the Muimgeni water transfer scheme to supply water to Durban. And with the city of eThekwini, Durban in 2016 for the Western and Northern Aqueduct. This was co-financed with DBSA and with the support from IPSA. In South Africa, our approach, since as an international financing institution, we bid on RFPs for financing. and we cannot, despite the fact that we are a government agency, we cannot replace the private sector, meaning that if the private banking sector of South Africa is interested in the project, we won't bid. Hence, our approach is to develop technical cooperation on innovative schemes, and to fund the projects which are built with these cooperations, if no other financier from the private sector is interested. So this is how we have recurring discussions with DBSA on innovative schemes, where DBSA has the leading role in developing the scheme, but we can support them either through financing to DBSA, like we did in the past, or in developing the financing approach to municipalities or entities who would benefit from this scheme. In our pipeline, for the moment, we have discussions with TCTA around the Umkomazi water transfer project, which RFP will be issued in 2022. This is another water transfer scheme to supply Durban. And we believe that the private sector will not complete the financing plan because the investment is very large. And we could go for this project with EIB and DBSA, for example, other in co-financing with other institutions, like we did for TCTA, for the Muimgeni transfer scheme, or for Durban Western and Northern Aqueduct. We also have technical cooperations with two major metropolis, Durban and Cape Town. With Durban, we have a technical assistance to prepare PPP RFPs on energy production on the water facilities, like hydro power turbines within the pipes, within the main transfer pipes, solar panels on the reservoirs, for example, and some other projects. We have a water reuse on golf courses, which could be a PPP as well, to take water from the wastewater management plants and water the golf courses with it. In Cape Town, we have two technical cooperations, one on the financial strategy of the water service, water and sanitation service, which includes the tariff strategy, the asset amortization rules, and many other rules which could improve actually the financial management and asset management of the water assets and service, and hence reduce the cost for the customer and improve the quality of the water service. We have another cooperation which is about to start with the French Geological Survey Bureau, BRGM, on groundwater management, because Cape Town, like the majority of South African cities, despite the fact that they have a stress on water, they don't use and they don't know the groundwater which is at their disposal. And so we have this cooperation to improve their knowledge and the strategy of management for their groundwater. Subsequently to these technical cooperations, we have exchanges with the BSA on what we do as well. And we hope to develop projects which can go on the market and maybe fund them either through financing of the municipalities or water boards for what concerns, for example, wastewater management and sanitation, or water supply and water transfer. Or with the TCTA, we have several actors in our focus to propose financings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabian, and apologies for getting your affiliation incorrect in the introduction.
You're welcome.
My notes. But thank you, and you know, the AFD's contributions to the sector are significant, and you know, we work with the AFD in many ways, both particularly on the technical side, but also on the funding side. So again, I think you've highlighted where the partnerships come in from the financiers, not just in terms of looking at where contributions can be made on the infrastructure side, but also looking at some of these systemic, some of these capacity issues, and the enabling issues that are required for the service delivery that we need. So thank you for those contributions. Colleagues, I'm urging you to bear with us while we carry on. I think we're now going to hit the ground, as it were, with some of the case study experiences that we want to really use to inform our discussion in the Q&A session. We've had a number of really useful and orientating inputs from the national level, from the perspective of funders and from the perspective of programs to address some of those challenges. And I think what's missing, and what I'm really looking forward to hearing, is let's say the receiving end of some of the support. How has it been taken? What's been done at a city level, at a municipal level? What are some of the successes at a local level? But also, let's hear from municipalities around perhaps what are some of the challenges that they experience in receiving the support, and how does it land? How can we work better to make sure that the support that is available, the support that's on offer, addresses the challenges as effectively as possible? So we've got inputs coming up in the next section from the cities, but before we get there, we're going to hear from Alwyn Coetzee, who's with IPSA at the DBSA. He's got considerable experience at the DBSA and has various qualifications also in financial, economic, regional and urban development disciplines, as well as operational management. He's got significant experience in the financing of large infrastructure projects, and he's going to share with us some of his experience and inputs in the rollout of the current IPSA program by the DBSA in partnership with the EU and National Treasury. And from there, then we'll move into the contributions from the city of eThekwini and the city of Tshwane before we open up for our question and answer session. So Alwyn, I'm handing over to you for your input, talking specifically about IPSA, and then we'll move into how the IPSA support has delivered projects at a local level. So Alwyn, first to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthea. Can I go ahead? I'm not sure on the screen. Am I on the screen?
Hear you. We can see you. You're
okay,
ready to go.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Andrea, for that introduction. I will cover basically three main points. The first is, from the IPSA perspective, what is the goals, the objectives, and expected results, and then indicators that guide the actions of selecting projects. Secondly, the role and the responsibility that we had from the DBSA. And then thirdly, what was achieved with the program according to the IPSA performance indicators. As been mentioned early on, it's basically a 100 million euro program that is targeted towards South Africa and the region, which has not been, I think, amplified at the moment, but it was also in support of the region. Of the 100 million, we have committed 42 million euro already, and we are implementing those projects. So the talk will be specifically around that. So the purpose of the IPSA funding is to enhance sustainable economic growth of infrastructure projects in South Africa and in the SADC region. as the lack of adequate infrastructure has been identified as one of the key constraints for faster economic growth and social inclusion in South Africa and so the SADC region. So to make this happen, the DBSA was delegated in terms of a financing agreement by the EU and National Treasury, and the DBSA was selected based on our expertise and capacity to do projects. And the decision which projects were to undertake was then there was a joint steering committee that was established by National Treasury on the chairmanship of Treasury, involving the key departments to selecting those projects. And the job of the DBSA was then to select projects, appraise those projects, and present it to the implementing steering committee, and then to conclude contracts and then implement the projects according to the milestones that has been agreed for the program. So the selection of projects, was really to select those priority projects that's in support of the South African's multi-term strategic development framework, as well as for the regional development plan for SADC, and selecting the projects from that. The main purpose from that was then to promoting of essential infrastructure investments, which serve the needs of the beneficiaries and sustainable growth and climate change. And of course, then the viability and sustainability was the important factor in that. The sectors that IPSA is covering is basically all the economic infrastructure projects, from energy, roads, ICT, but let's focus on the water sector specifically. And the intention there, from ISA is to improve, water source management, enhance the water management capacity, improve maintenance of water and wastewater infrastructure, particularly at the municipal level, promotion of environmental friendly technologies, and integrated waste management. That gave really the framework in terms of the focus from the IPSA. The indicators of the performance indicators of IPSA was then, to the development of the South Africa's national infrastructure, and then to mobilize with the grant funding from IPSA, to mobilize that with debt financing from the participating DFIs, and then also obviously, to create, jobs in this whole process. So the principles that guide the activities in selecting the project, in what we try to achieve is, in the first place, was financial leverage. Reference was made, to blending of blended finance, and I think we had first-hand experience what that entails, to really blend the IPSA funding instruments with loans from participating DFIs, and then also, from private sector that can be blend into that. So the whole intention was, to use the IPSA funding to get it 5 to 10 times. And I will integrate later on in the talk, what was actually the gearing that was achieved. So one can almost see, the funding that came from IPSA was there as a seed to make projects happen and actually raise more capital than was initially was possible. Then, obviously we had to focus it then on priority projects from the project owners. So before we would engage any work and selecting projects, we, for example, at the municipal level, we would like to have the council's resolution that is actually the top priority within that particular with the municipality before we would then engage in that. And then to make sure that it's very cost effective to have the necessary impact what was intended. Further on, the fourth point was in terms of additionality. So the grant funding from IPSA must be additional to what would be been achieved other than was normal. So it must achieve positive results that would be achieved without the grant funding. It must bring projects forward. It would happen faster than without the funding. So maybe then projects that was planned for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, in the future, that through the funding that made available through IPSA, those projects will happen sooner. Further on, to crowding in private capital to ensure the commercial sustainability of the projects, and to, as far as possible, to promote innovative technologies. So, and a very important point, is that we received a number of projects, when, and I think that's a natural reaction from, for example, if a municipality come to know that there are grant funding available to support the important priority projects, to replace their funding with the IPSA funding. And that was a very key consideration. No replacement of existing capital. It has to bring additionality, to make things happen quicker and faster. That would otherwise not be the position. So it had to create added value. And then, close cooperation between development partners. Probably has indicated, for example, the Aqueduct project that has been jointly funded by us, and so there are other examples as well, to make bigger projects happen faster and lower the cost of money to the client or to the municipality then specifically that will do that. Just taking a brief breathing here in terms of the IPSA funding products, and I just want to emphasize a little bit on that. I think it's a very well thought out program, and we have lived through this over a couple of years. The first one is that there was support, technical assistance, grant studies, and that was to a large extent deployed on the current program. And what the DBSA used to prepare projects to bankability. When the IPSA started, there was a number of projects, a whole list of, I think, about 200 projects that was suggested. And, none of those projects were ready for implementation. So we had to take those projects and prepare them to make them ready for investment. And that is quite a long and a challenging task. As indicated in one of the previous speakers, money is not always the problem. It's also an issue to bring projects to a bankable stage. And we from the DBSA, and I'm sure our partners working side by side with us, have that experience as well. Secondly, there was direct capital grants and interest rate subsidies. Direct capital grants were, for example, if you have a project and it's too expensive to the end user to make capital grant available with the debt financing. Remember, we were striving to raise debt capital as well to make the pool bigger that you can make projects happen. So direct grants were also mobilized to support those projects. And then thirdly, interest rate subsidies, especially, with projects that's dependent on the revenue streams to come. We all know that in the space of interest during construction really have a huge impact on the cash flows of a project and the cost of it. So interest rate subsidies, were mobilized to make it more affordable to the end user. And then lastly, loan guarantee, to provide some loan guarantees and insurance premium for projects, during the initial stages for developing of those projects. So in terms of the 3 million or 42 million euros, roughly about 300 million rands that has been that is currently in implementation. 8 of those projects, a total of about 22 projects, are specifically in support of the water sector so far. So it's a large proportion of the project is actually in that particular area, and we expect that all those about 75% implemented, and we expect that the full program from that 42 million will be implemented by mid 2023 to have the sort of the full benefits from that. I just would like to highlight here that these projects that I'm referring to is mainly in South Africa. We couldn't find any water projects outside South Africa in the SADC region. And one of the main reasons for that is that the institutions in support of the water sector is very weak and doesn't have the capacity to take on debt financing. Remember, I've indicated earlier on that was part of the conditions of mobilizing the IPSA funding resources is to gear it 5 to 10 times at least with the IPSA grant funding to address all those issues around additionality, etc., etc. So I'm just going to dive a little bit down deeper into the projects, specifically what was achieved with them. So we have invited, as you've indicated, Anthea, that we have invited the city of Tshwane and eThekwini on the Aqueduct project specifically, who were beneficiaries of that. But other than that, we also had projects to the Drakensberg municipality, to the Oeverstrand, Polokwane, and Jokabi, which is a district municipality which we have supported, and the Umhlatu's project. So if I just can briefly, and I'm coming to the end of my section, is to say, for those projects that we've supported, and I'm not going to dwell into the city of Tshwane, only to say that for the city of Tshwane, it was not only grant capital that was provided to assist for the preparation of the important water program there, but is to bring actually that to investment level. And if you counter that into account, the initial preparation grant funding that was made available, if the whole program gets rolled out, eventually would be a 50 times gearing of the IPSA funding. In terms of the Drakensberg municipality, they have many challenges around affordability. Their debt ratios are very limited, though, to take on additional capital works. So through the IPSA grant, we created room for them to raise some further debt. So the 1.4 million euro that was invested there put them in a position to gear that 28 times. I think it's quite significant that really enabled them in terms of the additionality argument to address some of the backlogs that they have, to upgrade the infrastructure. And we made it during our appraisal process, they took very great care to ensure that the bulk of those investments were for the underprivileged, section of the community that benefited from this investments. And in this particular program, during the construction phase, it really created a lot of opportunities, 228. Not so many, permanent jobs, because, the municipality has a well-established maintenance team to take care of that. We also provided to Drakensberg, when we reviewed and did the appraisal, that they had a number of projects that were not fully prepared, and they didn't have sufficient funding to prepare that projects to be ready for implementation. And we have prepared 11 projects. Most of them are related to the water sector. And some of those projects we are now taking up for implementation. We, for example, engage with National Treasury to find, funding to also make that possible to implement those projects. Coming to the district municipality of Dokawi, I mean, it's really a poor area. I mean, very limited opportunity to take on debt financing. We did the work from the DBS side. We did the appraisal. We looked and not only at the technical matters, but also on the financial position, and they basically could not afford a loan. We engaged with Treasury, with the authorities there that oversee the financial position of those municipalities, and we subsidized with the IPSA funding, the loan funding to make it affordable to Jokabi to take on this debt funding. So in the end, they were in a position to take on a water treatment and distribution work and to upgrade the water and sanitation works. That really put them in a position to bring up, the standard of those works and to provide services to a large part of the community. And again, without IPSA, these funding would not, these projects would not be available. So we succeeded there to gear the IPSA money 7.4 times. The Overstrand, also there, the 1.2 million euro that was provided there for us as a capital grant to them, it was geared 8.8 times. And that investment, that it's on the tail end of implementing the bulk works and connecting infrastructure there, would enable around about 3,000 housing units to benefit from this investments there. Similar to the in the Polokwane area. Yes.
I just want to, we've got the speakers from eThekwini and Tshwane, and I think, you're catching some of the other investments that IPSA's made, but I think we've really got a great opportunity to dive in. So if you wouldn't mind just coming to a close, and then we can hand over and really hear from the receiving end how IPSA has worked. So thank you. Okay. Sorry to have you along.
Just give me a minute. So just when you cover, in terms of the Polokwane instance, the investment or the grant contribution from IPSA made it possible to unlock, the standstill that there was for the grant to provide new developments, to create the necessary bulk infrastructure to make those investments, and then for the IMSA 2 want to actually do this reuse program for water. But thank you then very much.
Thanks, Alvan, and sorry to do that. There's just there's a lot to cover, and I don't want to lose the opportunity to hear from our two city speakers who've got the experience to talk from. So I think, Alvan, thank you. And you've really set the scene very well around how IPSA's worked in that catalytic way. And I'm really, I don't want to dwell on more. I want to hear from both Linda and Lesego around how their cities have managed to work with IPSA to address some of the challenges. I think there's really a lot that we can learn, on both sides, both successes and if there are failures. So Linda, I'm going to hand over to you to come in from the city of eThekwini. Linda, colleagues, is the Senior Manager for Investments and Borrowings at eThekwini Municipality. Her responsibility is to ensure that the municipality is adequately funded through borrowings as well as active cash management. She's worked at several state-owned entities. She's got a bachelor's degree in commerce from the University of Cape Town and a master's in business administration from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And she's going to talk to us about the city of eThekwini's experience in working with IPSA, particularly in terms of the rollout of the Aqueduct program. So Linda, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Anthea. Good morning to the fellow panelists and the participants. I represent the city of eThekwini Metropolitan Municipality. The municipality has residents of about 3.7 million, the third largest after city of Joburg and city of Cape Town. Our balance sheet is about 42 billion, and our revenue is also about approximately over 40 billion.
Sorry, Linda, let me just come in if you don't mind. So colleagues, I know I'm seeing a comment that we have struggled with audio from Linda. We're aware of it. It's a technical challenge that we haven't been able to address. So if you wouldn't mind just turning up your volume on your computers, and Linda's doing her best to make sure that she's audible from her side. But it is a tech challenge. Linda, over to you to continue. Thanks.
Yes, apologies, colleagues. We did try to resolve the technical issue. So we have a total revenue of about 41 billion, and of that, about 13% comes from our water. And our expenditure is also approximately 40 billion. And part of that we spend on water services is about 13%. The municipality's mandate is to deliver basic services, and amongst others, including water and sanitation, electricity, and cleansing and solid waste. One of our key objectives is to manage resource adequately in order to sustain service provision. Over the last 10 years, the eThekwini region has experienced significant and rapid urbanization that has resulted in large-scale developments within the eThekwini region, in particular, which has resulted in substantial increase in water supply demand, which the existing aged bulk infrastructure cannot accommodate. Anthea, I'm not sure if I should continue. I see a lot of
Linda, do continue. Colleagues, if you are able to please turn up the volume on your sound, if you can, on your laptops. We acknowledge that the sound is low, but I think it is possible to hear. Yeah, please do turn up your sound if you can on the audience side. So that'll be everybody, all 200 of you. Turn up your volume, please. Thanks. Linda, continue.
I sincerely apologize for this. So to continue, the increase in demand for bulk water supply in the western and northern areas of eThekwini resulted in the construction, firstly, of the Western Aqueduct, which is the construction of a gravity trunk, which then became known as the Western Aqueduct, which then transports bulk water from Umgeni water supply system, from Midma Water Treatment Works to the Duzuma reservoir. And then secondly, to deal with the northern area water bulk supply was the gravity main trunk known as the Northern Aqueduct, which would assist with the supply of water from the Umgeni Durban Heights Water Treatment Works to the Phoenix Umhlanga reservoirs. So the combined value of these projects was just under 3 billion, 2.9 billion. And the Western Aqueduct's contribution was about 1.8 billion. And the Northern Aqueduct was about 1.2 billion. Both these projects actually commenced in 2012, 2013. But however, we as the municipality started engaging with IPSA only in 2014, when we responded to the RFP to submit projects in 2014. And in 2015, we received feedback from IPSA that northern and the western and northern aqueduct projects would be selected for funding under the IPSA. Now, traditionally, the municipality would fund projects through grants, through loans, and through internally generated funding. So when we looked at the IPSA structure, we were actually quite intrigued and quite excited to actually receive direct project funding, because the municipality generally would receive general funding, not specific project financing. So when we received feedback from IPSA through the DBSA as the implementing agent, we were offered a package which included a grant funding of just over 100 million rands, as well as debt funding of approximately 700 million. The 700 million was made up of, was to be split or funded, debt funding through 3 DFIs initially at the beginning. However, 2 DFIs ultimately ended up doing the lending, and we received 350 million from DBSA and 350 million from the AFD. This, from our perspective, the IPSA has been very useful in the sense that it allowed us to fund the northern and western aqueduct at a very good rate, almost subsidized. What actually made it very attractive to us was the part about the grant funding, which actually assisted us to lower the cost of funding, which eventually results in a lower tariff for the community at the end of the value chain. So the process of negotiation took some time, because we were awarded, or the project was selected in 2015, and only in 2016, or just about 18 months later, that we managed to actually finalize all the details of the grant, and then as well as the debt funding. I think one of the challenges that made the process take a little bit longer was that we were dealing with 2 separate lenders or funders with 2 separate loan agreements, which each lender had their own requirement. But ultimately, we managed to sign, and the funds flowed to the municipality. So in terms of ensuring that we followed our supply chain management processes, we also had to go back to the market and also request that other funders let us know or give us prices, so that we can be able to actually benchmark as to whether this indeed funding is coming at an affordable price, in order for us to say this was a cost-effective funding. And indeed, the IPSA funding was a package was actually cost-effective, which came in at approximately 150 basis points, 1.5% lower than what we would have received in the market for such funding. Some time has passed. The projects had already started in 2012, 2013. However, the agreement was that we would only fund expenditure for both the northern and western aqueduct from the 2017-2018 financial year. So it has been 3 months into the funding, and our experience has been good with both the DBSA, IPSA, and AFD. We have managed, the project is almost at an end, it's about 90% complete. The funds have been utilized adequately, and the contribution to our total cost of funding has also been very meaningful. So according to us, the IPSA has benefited the municipality in terms of the volume, the 700 million that we received in total from both the DBSA and the AFD as the participating DFIs, firstly. Secondly, in terms of the pricing, which was quite cost effective. Thirdly, the municipality tries to fund itself with long tenor funding. So we were able to access long tenor funding. The funding was for 15 years, which adequately matches the asset that we were trying to fund, as well as yes. So in general, the IPSA funding has been very useful to the municipality, but in particular, what has been meaningful to us is the cost of funding that we have experienced through the IPSA program. I think I will end there. Thank you, Anthea.
Thank you, Linda. That was fascinating and really interesting to just hear from your perspective in the city on how the IPSA contribution not only helped to advance the project, but helped you to leverage the balance sheet of the municipality, and then also had an impact on the cost of that capital right down to the consumer level. So I think a really insightful and valuable. And you spoke to some of the challenges as well, the challenges of trying to bring in different sources of finance and to use that for a project. So I want to move very quickly, if I may, onto the city of Tshwane. There's been a change to the speaker for the city of Tshwane since the program was put out. We've now got Luzenberger Lakuba, who's the program manager for water conservation and demand management in the city of Tshwane, in the office of the CFO. Luzenberger is a qualified science professional with a postgraduate diploma in mining from the University of Witwatersrand, and is working towards a Masters of Business Administration. Luzenberger is going to talk to us around Tshwane's experience with IPSA, particularly in the preparation assistance for the feasibility for water demand management, a multi-year water demand management program. So Luzenberger, I'm going to hand over to you to share us some of Tshwane's experience, if you may come in. And from there, we are going to open up for Q&A. So Luzenberger, I'm not seeing you. There you are. Fantastic. Please come in. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthea. Good day, everyone. I'm just going to explain the program that we started with IPSA DBSA. This program, like as I think Anthea mentioned, and even the other speakers, Alvin, we received grant funding in 2019 from IPSA to start a feasibility study looking at in terms of our water conservation demand management program, funding around 34 million. Subsequent to that, the additional was 6 million for the program manager funding. And also another funding was 20 million for bulk meter installation. So what we have done is that we started with a feasibility study, but beforehand, with the project preparation from DBSA, we managed to do a scoping study so that we can start with a feasibility study, and then we did the pilot. We're doing also the pilot project. So the program has got two phases. As I mentioned, this one is the first phase, and there is another phase where we need to roll out the whole program based on the feasibility study. We completed the feasibility study around March 2020, and the feasibility study was detailed. I think we really appreciate the support from IPSA and DBSA, because the way the feasibility study is structured is that we needed to develop a program approach, as Johan said, for us to implement the project, whereby we had to first look at, in terms of water resources, infrastructure, look at our tariff modeling, whether we are doing our cost modeling accurately. And subsequent to that, we develop a financial modeling to look at if the project is bankable and feasible. And that is the critical issue here. I think Johan mentioned that most of our projects in the cities or in the country, they are not bankable. And we need to come to that level of having a bankable project where you can go to investors and say, okay, this is the project, this is the benefits of the project, this is how much return I can get from this project. And we have managed to package this water conservation management project in that context, where we had to run different scenarios. And from those scenarios, we can get in terms of whether this project, if we're going to start it, is going to reduce our non-revenue water or not. Currently, through the project, we have managed to develop the project in 240 TMZs. Initially, the city, when we started the project, most of the infrastructure was run around a regional management way. We have got 7 regions, so the network is just for us to run the water infrastructure into 7 regions. But for you to run a water conservation management program, you need to go into detail. And normally we do it in district management zone. So again, if you look at the infrastructure of the city, we have almost 700 kilometers of your bulk pipeline, 10,000 of reticulation network, with your 22 billion of that infrastructure in terms of costing. So for you to operate that and manage that and do it in a detailed way of you managing non-revenue water, it's difficult. You need to go to each and every zone. And for you need to also look at in terms of your return on investment. So the way we look at it, as I said, we ran those scenarios and we came about to say the best scenario that we got was around 44 million. 400 million where we came to one scenario that was feasible. But what I can say is that through this project, what we have managed to do is that we managed also to leverage and get more support from all the stakeholders. I think, Johan, you mentioned the issue around whether there is a political will. I think through the project, we're partnering with the Water and Sanitation Department. I'm in the Finance Department. We're working closely with the Water and Sanitation Department. We're working together across the city, with our revenue departments and sections. Even from the mayor side, they have brought to the project. I think we have managed to get that support. Yesterday, we had a meeting with the MMC of Finance where we presented the project again. So across the city, the project, we managed to get more support. In terms of bulk metering, I think the 20 million we got from IPSA, we're replacing our mechanical meters with electromagnetic flow meters. Currently, we are installing those across the city. This is the latest development where we moving away from mechanical to EMF meters where we can accurately measure. I think the likes of rainwater have moved to that level. CDB and I know all these water boards now, they've started installing EMF meters. The reason for us is that we need to accurately determine our water balance. Most of our water losses is because if you go to many municipalities, understanding where your water losses are is difficult. And for us, I think we needed to start in that level and understanding where our water losses are. But subsequent to that is that we managed to also install loggers in all our meters so that we can get online data. I think that's what we have done so far. So we can accurately measure water balance and be able to quantify our water losses and come up with interventions. That's what we are doing at the pilot site. We have started another pilot site through this project where we are going to test now all these innovations in terms of interventions so that we can see what we can do in terms of reducing our water losses. Currently, the project is ongoing. We are about to finish the pilot site. We're about to finish the bulk meter installation. And from there on, I think we have already started with the rollout. In the next financial year, we are going to look at 20 distribution management zone where we have prioritized now. So it's not going to be the way that the city has been used to dealing with your water conservation and management, where we have been reactive. Now we are going to look at it in a programmatic way, prioritization way. That's where we are going to do now. So we have managed to do that way, if I may say. So I think the CFO, I had a discussion with him today. Unfortunately, he's sick, but he sent his gratitude to IPSA and TBSA, and he's very, very, happy about the project and with the funding so far. I think even our water colleagues, they are very happy in terms of the support that we have received through the project, so that now we can structure our program going forward in a programmatic way and look in terms of our water losses in that context. So, yeah, if I can, finish, move from there. But over and above that, I think what we have done to the project, we have managed to augment our capacity in the municipality. We have managed to train our plumbers. We have sent to training We have managed to train some of them on PRV management or maintenance. So there are whole lots of interventions that we have managed to innovate in terms of this program. Yeah, if I can talk about it, I can take the whole day. But yeah, I think Antia, I'll stop there. But yeah, I just want to send my gratitude to the colleagues at DBSA, Alvin, I know, and Johan, and then I think Constant. We have worked tirelessly on this one with Namnebo, structuring the program, making sure that we have got a project steering committee meeting going on. So it's been a mammoth task, but we have managed to achieve a lot, I think. And I really appreciate the support and yeah. So I'll end there. Thanks, Antia.
Stefan, thank you so much. And again, another very inspiring input, really, from one of the metros on a project that's delivering results. And again, I mean, the kind of questions rattling around in my head, and we're going to move into the Q&A now. So if I can ask the panelists just to turn on their videos so we can start responding to some of the questions that we've received. But Lesego, I just want to say to you, and to Linda and to the DBSA, how do we take these experiences to scale from where I sit, in Treasury and perhaps where Leonardo sits in the department, seeing the outcomes, seeing your, water loss figures go down, seeing, the service delivery outcomes improve. We need to take these promising and significant achievements to scale. And so what sort of sits in my mind as we move into the Q&A is, how do we do that? And Johan set out an ambitious program that the DBSA is starting in partnership with the department. I think to look at doing that, to building on the experiences and successes and challenges, because it's not all sunshine and roses, as we know. I think the coalface experience of the metros in getting investments like this to make a difference are significant, and we can highlight and showcase successes. But I think the blood, sweat, and tears that goes in, and the long journey that you walk in getting these projects to hit the ground and to start addressing one of those challenges is a significant part of the story. And where you fail, if we talk about those challenges, we learn. So as much as it's great to be able to showcase successes, in part, the learning happens where we actually dive into the challenges that we face, because the challenges are out there, and they were set out in the DDG's opening address. So yeah, I think that's where there's a lot of value. So with that, I don't want to occupy the airtime. We've had a number of questions come to us. If I could just ask the tech team to take the spotlight off Lesego, if you are able to do that. I'm not sure. But what I want to do then, so there've been a number of questions come in, and we've been passing them out to the different panelists. I'm going to ask Leonardo, if you are there. I don't see you, which is, no, I don't see you. Is Leonardo with us still?
Yes, he's there.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know why I can't. There's a.
I am here, don't worry.
Oh, there you go. Okay, I hear your voice. Leonardo, thank you. You've been listening right from the start, actively listening, I think. You've also been responding to some of the questions on the chat. You've flagged a couple of those questions, I think, to respond live to. Without prompting you, there's a lot, I think, that's come to you. I'd love to hand over to you to just, you can't respond to every question. I think there's been a lot that you would have gathered from the inputs, and perhaps almost more critically from the inputs from Linda and Lesego, because that's where the rubber hits the road for all of us. Actually, that's where, those experiences are the results of the policy, the regulation, the oversight that happens at your level, the investments that come in from the EU, the AFD, the support that the DBSA and IPSA give. So yeah, I want to hand over to you to respond to some of the questions. I think the question around the economic regulator is one that's useful. A question around, there was a question around when are we going to get the water improvement plan, and some of the institutional aspects around water services authorities. So I'm going to hand to you, and then I'm going to hand another bundle of questions, if I can, to Johan. So just a note to you, you're going to be up next, Johan, and then we'll look at some of the other questions that have come. So Leonardo, first to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anthea. I think that I also have to thank the participants for the questions they have posed and the ones that are already answered. I think there's one unanswered question as far as those that are already answered, and that is in terms of, this is a brief answer in terms of whether this budget enough for Plan William to be completed. Yes, there is. It's part of the augmentation that the department receives from National Treasury. So that project will be completed with internal funds. That is the short answer in terms of the remaining question. In terms of the economic regulator, I think that there were two questions from that perspective. And the one was saying, but why doesn't the Department of South Africa have an economic regulator? The first thing we have to say is that we do have a regulator. Unfortunately, it's off. At this point in time, it's not an independent regulator because it serves inside the department. But I think that what we are aspiring to, and with the assistance actually through the Blundlela program that was also administered through National Treasury for us, is that we already done some work in terms of how we're going to pose ourselves and gear ourselves for a proper water regulator to be in place. Not only an economic regulator, because we have noticed that in the past there is an economic regulator in the energy space. But unfortunately, well, the focus was on the financials and economy of the business. The technical aspects went backwards. And even though there was a good response or good report from the economic regulator in that regard, in 2006, the light started going on, which meant that technical standards and norms and standards were perhaps not adhered to. And that is the reason why I don't think we have to completely follow the concept that's in the UK, where they have Ofwat as economic regulator, they have the DWI as a drinking water inspectorate, and they've got the EA as the environmental agency, that it's different aspects of regulation being done by different entities. But just keep in mind that in that whole concept, even though there's strong privatization in the UK, the DWI is a very effective regulator inside the Department of Environmental, Food and Rural Affairs, which actually means that there is space for a regulator to function in the public sector. But the big element of the regulation for it to be effective would be autonomy. And in the space that we are currently working in, I think one of the questions posed was, what is the big hiccup? Why are we not just having an independent regulator? Would there be any interest being protected? I think that from a perspective of the department side is that we came out of a point where when you open a newspaper or you open an app or a news article about the department, you saw corruption. And I think that perhaps one can just mention it from that perspective, that we have turned the point in that regard. We've reduced it, we actually eradicated that aspect from our business. So there's nothing to protect at this point in time. All that we need to do is that we have significant agentization that's happening in the department. We have 2 out of 6 CMAs being established. We have water use associations that's being established, the Water Research Commission, the water boards, and the Water Research Commission as well. So what the minister felt is to say that let us have a quasi-regulator in place. And the quasi-regulator comes to a concept of to have something in place currently that will enhance the credibility of the regulatory function, and then move it out should it then be acceptable to all role players. So that is the answer as far as the regulator is concerned. I think there was another question in terms of how do we assist water service authorities with the local regulation function in terms of the water service providers? That element is actually included as far as the Structures Act, Section 78, But the point is, as far as what the department is now doing, the minister already had his bilateral with the Minister of Kokta, Minister Dlamini Zuma, to actually say that we have to review that. Because we had a situation where the department made a point to say, Randwater move into Bushbuck Reach because we feel that there's something going wrong there. And Randwater did all the investments, moved into Bushbuck Reach, which is quite a rural municipality. And then the municipality took the decision as to say, well, we don't want you here because according to our Section 78 processes, we can do this ourselves. And according to law, they could do that. So there is now need to actually rethink all of that. And that is the reason why at political level, that is not a discussion that is being held at that level to ensure that we deal with it. I think there was another question in terms of where do we find that plan? Unfortunately, it was a concept that was presented to Cabinet. I'm sure that if you seek through the minutes of Cabinet, you will find it there. But the fact is, it's not a document. The document is being developed and will be is due to be resubmitted to Cabinet in May 2022, which means that that is coming, and we will consult on that one as well. And then there was another question in terms of the 22 projects. I think I saw it in the chat says that how many of these projects were in the rural areas, right? In fact, the majority of them were in the rural areas. I think I counted 15 out of the 22 that actually is outside a large or a bigger town or a city. But unfortunately, due to the network that we have as far as our integrated water resource network is concerned, because those are water resource projects, it actually is integrated and interlinked across the country, which means that some places, even though the government water scheme is being developed in Timbuktu, there's sometimes where a bigger town or a city will still benefit from it as well. So it's difficult to actually make that definitive distinction between rural and urban development. And did I cover everything?
From what I've seen, you have, I think. Thank you. I will flag any more that maybe come your way. Let me just see. But in the meantime, there's so many questions, but it's good. There's a lot of engagement. Leonardo, thank you. Let me hand over to Johan. Johan, there were a range of questions that came your way from, I passed one on the yuck factor of water reuse to you, but I think also some of the questions that have come in around capacity building and how do we sort of strengthen the effectiveness of capacity building. Was another. Yeah, I mean, there were a bundle of questions to you. Leonardo, if you could just hold one. There was one around, it's a little bit more of a resource management, but was looking at maybe, well, if you can take a stab at it later if you want, but around retention and from rainwater. But Johan, over to you for now.
Yeah, thanks, Anthea. I've listed a couple of questions that I can maybe sort of just run through quickly. The first one was from Jurgens around IoT and smart metering and so on. So I think that definitely poses a huge opportunity for us to bring in advanced metering, advanced infrastructure, you know, all these Internet of Things, Bitcoin and blockchain and all of these things, I think, pose a significant opportunity for us. It's probably not something that one will look at holistically, but definitely address on a project by project basis. So I can't remember exactly, Lesego, to what extent you guys included some of these in the feasibility study for the non-revenue water project in Tshwane. But I think that's definitely something that can be built into these feasibility studies. We do have it as part of a standard terms of reference for feasibility studies on non-revenue water or water conservation and demand management projects, is for us to start including those, so that it can just strengthen the way in which we address these projects, structure the technical solutions. It will make it much easier for us to do remote monitoring and those types of things. So I think that there's definitely a huge opportunity for that. Nanda had a question around how do we bring partners on board in the partnerships office to help develop and implement projects. I think there might have been one or two other questions as well with that theme. So I think, Nanda, what we're trying to do with the Partnerships Office is, as we said, municipalities will remain, and here I'm just referring to municipalities, it can apply to other owners of projects as well, will always remain the owner of the projects. So the idea is that they would approach the Partnerships Office and say, can you provide assistance to me to prepare and then finance and develop my project? So we intend to then potentially have procured service providers, maybe on a panel basis within the Partnerships Office, that we can then allocate projects to, for them to go and assist the municipalities with those project preparation activities. And then, depending on what the most appropriate funding and implementation solution is, so we may find that we have to follow a PPP, or we will use a PPP route, or it can be conventional balance sheet, depending on what that recommendation is from the feasibility study. One will then go and procure services from, or procure finance, or procure EPC and O&M from that perspective. So I think we're not digressing away too much from what the existing structures and models are. It's just a way of us trying to assist and support these municipalities and the projects from going ahead. There was also a question from Mpilo around how do they access the Partnerships Office. Just to note, the Partnerships Office hasn't been established yet. We are on the verge of signing the agreement with the department, which will then allow us as DBSA to go ahead and establish the office. We'll probably recruit some resources to be part of that office, and it will be housed initially within the DBSA, and then we will be able to really take that forward. Vera had a question on the list of PPP projects. Maybe we can just take that one offline and see what it is that we can share. Again, from an IPSA and a DBSA perspective, and what Fabian shared from an AFD perspective, these projects are prepared and then we'll go to market. So, we will raise funding on a competitive basis through the market as one would normally do. There's no sort of exclusive right for any of the participants to fund any of these projects. Dumisani mentioned something about the capacity building. I'm not sure if I understood exactly what you meant with that, but I think for me, capacity building is such a, as you also mentioned, Anthea, is such an important point that we need to address, and it can be done on a sort of a collective basis or a programmatic basis, but can also be done on a project-specific basis to make sure that we transfer the skills to municipalities, but then also link with other government programs that is addressed and aimed at providing that capacity support. Jurgens also mentioned around ecological infrastructure. Yeah, Jurgens, it's such a difficult one. It's such an important one, but also a very difficult one to finance, because as you rightly say, there are no clear revenue streams coming from these ecological infrastructure projects. So it's probably something that we need to look into a bit more detail. I know that the department and Treasury is working on the pricing strategy. There might be some elements of revenue that we can then secure and allocate and ring fence to go towards ecological infrastructure. For me, ecological infrastructure is sort of a potential ring-fenced program within the program office, but also cross-cutting across the different other elements. Because if you address water treatment, wastewater treatment through a reuse perspective, it will have an impact on the ecological reserve going downstream. So there are different linkages, but again, also looking at potentially accessing climate finance to be able to address some of those challenges. And I know the DBSA is currently working with SANBI and Jeff around on putting a sort of a program together around ecological infrastructure. Tony mentioned about the eThekwini reuse and the yuck factor, the direct potable reuse. Tony, I think for me, there are two elements here that we need to address, and this is something that we've specifically flagged under our water reuse program, is we probably need a national communication strategy to how do we start educating communities, the public in general, around reuse, why we have to reuse, what the risks are. But that awareness campaign and education campaign is extremely important if we want to start scaling our water reuse projects. But then that will also then filter down to a project level education process, which is what eThekwini is busy with, and I know they're busy with a number of these water reuse projects within the municipality at the moment. It's always interesting to note, how and when you engage the public. I think if you engage the public in City of Cape Town, for example, before the drought, you may have received a very different response than if you approach them during or just after the drought to say, are you willing to consider water reuse? But I think that's the way the world is going. Our neighbors in Namibia has been doing this for many years. Internationally, it's being implemented, and the technology is there to sufficiently treat the water. So that is just that education and awareness campaign I think we need to follow. Nanda, you mentioned something about the Eskom just transition to repurpose the power station infrastructure. Very exciting. I think it's definitely something that we should consider and bring in under the National Water Program, because it will address some of the challenges that communities are facing, and anything that I think will enable us to improve service delivery is something that we can look at. So definitely want to engage with you further on that. And then Mandita also, I noted something around the indigent communities within our municipalities. So there was another question from Nanda that I answered in writing, but I think a lot of our municipalities in our rural and under-resourced areas are facing the challenge of poor revenue streams. So if they don't have people that are able to pay for services, they don't have that revenue stream. We know, however, that there are grant funding. There's grant funding that flows to those municipalities, and we need to look at in more effective and innovative ways in which we can utilize those grant funding. So, if we, and that's the PSP model that we've designed, is to say, can we raise funding up front against a portion of future grant funding, let's say over a 10 or a 15-year period, that we know will flow to a specific municipality. So often these municipalities use the grants, but the limited amount of grants available to them means that they have to stretch the implementation of the project over a number of years. And that means that the benefit only takes 5 or 6 or 7 years before the benefit of the project realized. And also there's often significant cost increases if you stretch a project over a number of years. But what we're trying to do with the PSP model is to say, can we raise the funding that's required up front? We implement the project, let's say over a year or 2 years, depending on the construction constraints, and then we recover by using a portion of future grants over a longer term period. So there are different ways that we are trying to look at these things and trying to address some of those challenges that we know exist. I'll just pause there for now again. Thanks, Anthea.
Thanks very much, Johan, sorry. So I've got a bundle of questions for the cities. So Linda and Lesego, I'm going to ask you to respond to, but you're not going to come up next. Alvain, I'm going to ask you to come in. There's a couple of questions that speak to you, particularly linked to the IPSA fund. There was one around the tenure of the grants, and then or the loans, and then there was also a question around accountability, and that's come up in a couple of questions. Just, how do we make sure? What are the mechanisms in place for ensuring that funding that does come in is used for what it is provided for? So I was wondering if, from the perspective of IPSA, if you were able to give some responses to that. And while you give that your thoughts, I'm just going to give Linda and Lesego a heads up to the questions that I'm going to ask them to respond to. So Alvain, you'll be up next, but Linda and Lesego. So the questions that have come in that speak to the cities. So one question, was just, how does this all actually translate?
Apologies, we seem to have lost Anthea for a little while. I think we'll just give her a few minutes. But Alvain, maybe you can just go through the Q&A and answer some of those questions.
Yes, thank you. I will go ahead. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the IPSA program of the 100 million, as I've indicated, we have committed 42 million of that. The balance is still under consideration between National Treasury and the EU. However, in terms of the tenure and availability, as I've indicated, depending on the various products that we utilize. But for the capital interest rate and the capital grant, it goes with the tenure of the loan to raise the funding. So especially the interest rate subsidy, we structure in such a way that we cover mainly the interest during the construction period, so that it reduces the cost to the municipality. And then the capital grant, is actually to reduce the capital required and then therefore reduce the project. So the decision whether it is a capital grant or interest rate subsidy is determined by the details of the project, analyzing the financial position of the municipality. There was a question on how long it takes to consider a project. As I've indicated, there's a steering committee instituted, for the consideration of the project. So the project gets appraised, presented to the steering committee, and then the decision is then taken there, and then a non-objection from the EU is then presented to that. Following that, under approval, a formal agreement is then entered between the DBSA on behalf of IPSA, according to which then the payments are made. I'm making this point because it answers the second question. So payments are then done according to the milestones that's been agreed. That process is overseen by a joint committee at the project level between the recipient and the DBSA that monitors that. So payments are made then per milestones, and we have the responsibility to ensure that the money is then applied to what has to be delivered. We on the back end gets then audited by both so in South African situation and by IPSA. And over the 7 years that we've implemented the program, we had clean audits. So we take the responsibility from the DBSA side to make sure that the funding gets then for the purpose that it's been intended for. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvain, for those quick remarks. I will step in for Anthea. There's one follow-up question for the IPSA. There's a question we have received around the future plans of the IPSA fund in terms of water infrastructure. Is there going to be an IPSA phase 2? Question for you, Alvain.
The ambassador, is he on the call? Yes, the balance of the IPSA funding, around 60 million euro. The financing agreement between National Treasury and the EU is currently under discussion. So we will shortly get, communication from the EU when that is open again. The governing and implementation of that, we don't have the details of that, and that the EU and National Treasury will decide on that. It is not clear, or it has not been decided if DBSA will be responsible for the implementation of the second phase, but that is a decision for National Treasury. At the moment, we don't have a confirmation on that. All that we know is that it will happen soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvin, for that question, for that response. Now, the question is to the city of Tshwane as well as the city of eThekwini. And the people would like to know, on a practical basis, all of the investments and the funding that is raised through DFIs and other commercial lenders. What does this mean realistically for a layman and a citizen in South Africa? This question is for you, Linda.
Thank you for the question. So with our mandate for service delivery is one of those things that we cannot delay. So the sooner the service is provided to the community, the better. So our experience is that if we are able to access funding or funding mechanisms like IPSA, it assists the cities to accelerate the basic service delivery that we provide to the communities. In this case, it would have probably meant that we take longer, and I think Johan did allude to this in his responses that so for some municipalities, it could take longer to implement some of the programs. So for us, this assisted us to implement the supply of bulk water to the northern and western areas. And then secondly, how we fund or how we apply the funding is very important in a sense that it assisted us to lower the water tariff. So what we bring into the model in terms of what actually the communities get to pay is very important. So we have to do that very carefully as well, because at the end of the day, we cannot, as much as we provide the services, we need to balance that with how much burden that we place on the community. So it assisted us in terms of the water tariff. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, for those remarks. City of Tshwane Lesego, may we have your response to that question about the impact on our communities?
Yes, thanks. I think this is a critical part, and this is what we have been working on with the feasibility study that help us, because this has to translate to ordinary people, citizens of the city of Tshwane. So through the feasibility study, I think we started, as I said, with the zero-based costing of our water resources and understanding what is the input cost when we do our tariff modeling. And we look at that from actual costing. We did two costing analysis. We look at our actual cost of water, and we look at also zero-based costing. And what we have done is that if you look at our 2019 analysis, when we did the zero-based costing, the actual costing modeling, it came around our costing, if you look at all the inputs cost to our water tariff, it came to around 12 rand per kiloliter of water that we supply to consumers. And we did comparison with other metros, and we saw that we are comparable. And in addition to that, when we run the feasibility, the financial modeling, and we look at, when you now look at the non-revenue water, and how does that influence your tariff costing, and we saw that basically your tariff, it's more sensitive to non-revenue water. The more you get more non-revenue water, the more your tariff goes up, if you consider that, and even collection risk. So when you look at those things, it's something that needs to be looked by the municipalities. The more you lose water, the more you have to take that into a tariff, because now you need to kind of like recompense or your losses. By doing that, we have to increase your tariff so that you can cover all those losses. So you can't go on like doing that, as a city, because now you are losing water now, then the consumers have to pay for that losses. So we said now for us we need to reduce our water losses. Hence we are doing this project. And I mean, we also ran some few scenarios yesterday with my colleagues, even the previous time, where we look at now, if we run this model and look at inflation, how does that influence your cost of water? So, and we saw that now, if we look at our current situation as a city and with the country, that we're going to have more inflation, and now your tariff is going to go up. So the only way that we can reduce those tariffs going up is when you deal with your losses. And that's where we now have to implement that. And that's how now the water is going to be cheaper for the consumers. And yeah, so that is the issue. And the issue around the indigent household, I mean, if you look at, we're giving our indigent household free basic water around 9 kiloliters per month. So you want your indigent household to remain in that consumption so that they don't get indebted because they cannot pay. If they go over, then it means that you need to, write off that debt, and it's not nice. I mean, so what we have done so far with the pilot is that we have looked at indigent household, how now you're going to engage your indigent household to make sure that they consume that free basic water, and if they cannot, then it means that they need to be aware, to say, okay, now I've reached my maximum. It means now I'm going to another band, and will I be able to afford? So we are trying to look at those kind of innovative way of making sure that the city, at the end of the day, it reduces its own debt from your bad debt write-off from based on these issues. So those are the things that we look at, and we are also trying to pilot innovative solutions. I think one of the questions was like, how do we take up innovative solutions? With this project, we are trying to do that, to say, okay, if we're going to pilot, what kind of solutions that we can take up? And this has been the case, to say municipalities are not able to pilot innovative solutions. But with this pilot project, we're able to do that and look at how we can take up those innovative solutions. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Lesego, for those remarks. The other question, which I'd like to direct to the French Development Agency, Mr. Fabien. Fabien, are you still there with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
We have one question from an audience regarding the investments by the French and other developed markets in South Africa to promote development. The audience would like to know why the French still view South Africa as an investment destination. What are the motivating factors that drive investments by the French into South Africa? Your response, please.
Well, this is a pretty large question, not focused on the water sector. Actually, the French Development Agency aims at international development and at supporting French diplomacy, which is targeting all the countries in the world. We have the right to intervene in South Africa for development aid through OECD agreements. I mean, once the World Bank and other international financing institutions can intervene in a country, we have the right to do so. And for French diplomacy, it's important to be present in South Africa because South Africa is an emerging country. It represents a great part of African production. And so you have a leading role in African economy, and this is important for France to be connected to this economy, and to I mean, conversely, if South Africa is in distress, economic distress, like for example, if Eskom goes to bankruptcy, or if you have a major social turmoil, it may destabilize the whole of Africa, including those who are those countries who are in the the usual scope of French influence. So it's very important for us to be connected to the African economy and African diplomacy. You can support us and we can partner for resolutions at the United Nations and for climate's sake, etc. And this is the current focus of French diplomacy clearly is on climate and democracy and peace around the world. And with European countries and the European Union, it's very important for us to harness African countries in this effort.
Thank you so much for those remarks. We are noting the keywords is around collaboration, about economic and social development, and about strengthening our partnerships across the globe. Now, in the interest of time, we'd just like to say thank you so much for your valuable comments and remarks on the chat function. We'd now like to call upon Zweli. Zweli is the head of program development at the Development Bank of South Africa for final and closing remarks. Over to you, Zweli.
Thank you very much, Desiree, and thank you to everyone that participated. First and foremost, I would like to thank the panelists, the moderators, and the participants for sharing their views and their valuable contribution to this webinar. I think we wouldn't have had such a great webinar if it wasn't for that. This webinar has shown that there is hope for us finding solutions for the challenges that we see in the water sector. And the greatest outcome has been the commitments that have been made by the different individuals who've spoken today, in particular, our partners that we've worked with, DBSA itself, the department, and the recipients of the IPSA funding that was made available. But for me, the biggest highlight that comes out of this is the importance of collaboration. The one thing that we've noticed with the IPSA program is the fact that it's been a collaboration between the DBSA, the EU, National Treasury, but also most importantly, all the people who received funding from IPSA, who have actually assisted in creating a platform from which we can actually build our infrastructure development from. If we think about some of the work that's been done by IPSA, in developing programs, starting with the student housing program, which we spoke about at the previous webinar, going to the water sector, where there's been quite a few initiatives that we've actually gone through and developed. It creates hope that there is a drive within the country to find solutions for our country. And the one thing that struck me the most in these conversations that we've had today is, as I mentioned, the importance of collaboration, but also most importantly, something that that both Johan and Anthea actually mentioned, the importance of being able to scale up the solutions that we've spoken about today. We spoke about the solutions that were implemented in the city of Tshwane, also in the city of eThekwini as well. And the most important is, how do we scale up those solutions to benefit not just those cities, but also the other cities and municipalities around the country, which speaks to the importance of looking at how do we programatize the delivery of infrastructure, which has become very important. And there's been good work that's been done. Johan spoke about it, where we're looking at developing the program for water for the country as a whole, the National Water Program, which looks at the entire value chain of the water sector and tries to ensure that there's learnings from the one project to the next, and most importantly, that there's cross-cutting learnings throughout the sector. And I think the last thing, which I think is really important, is this issue of collaboration. There's an African saying that it takes a village to raise a child, but I think in this context, it takes a village to find the solutions for this village of South Africa. And I really do think that with the collaboration with everybody around this table, with the people who participated as guests, with the people who've participated as panelists, and everyone who's participated as moderators, we truly can find solutions for South Africa in this water sector. In particular, finding solutions which would be solutions developed by us here who are Africans, by us here who have tasted and walked the path of developing projects in the continent and in the country to find solutions for ourselves. And it's with that I thank everybody for participating. And it's with that I also mentioned that we look forward to collaborating and engaging with everybody in finding future solutions for our infrastructure challenges in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zweli, for those very wonderful words. And once again, we'd like to say thank you, a big thank you to everyone's participation and your contribution in this discussion. We trust you found it as engaging and as insightful as we have. And we'd like to assure you that the link will be available on social media platforms and we'll continue on our engagements offline. Thanks again for your time and we're wishing you a very good day. Bye-bye.